The standard development is you and I. This kind of public conversation, the voters themselves, the political parties, election observers, and critically important will be the basket of funders, the EU, and the donors, who are very important in marshalling resources for our electoral system.
Good day, everybody. Yes, we're here again. It's State of the Nation, Nigeria, the country with the largest concentration of Black people. Every day, new drama, every day, new story, every day, it's always breaking. Something is always happening. But in recent times, what is on top of the news is the e-transfer of votes, real-time transfer of votes. And the law has been in the Senate, and for some reason, there's been a lot of controversy. Members of the Senate said, yeah, they ratified it. They wanted electronic transfer of votes, election result real time. But the Senate president was a little bit mumbling about what they passed. There's lack of clarity. But having said all that, we need to examine what is happening, the importance of that law, why there has to be an amendment, and what have you. That's why today we are bringing not just an expert, someone that's been there, so that's advocated for democracy, even under the military junta. He's been arrested. He's been secretary of a party, the Alliance for Democracy. And there's nobody I know who is in a better place to speak on the issue, why it is important to have a proper electoral act for the country with the largest concentration of Black. That's why today I introduce to you Udenta O, Udenta, to the Atlantic Discourse channel, State of the Nation. Welcome, sir.
It's a pleasure to be with you guys this evening.
Fantastic. Yes. We follow all your work, and I think it's important to add that you're doing a very good job, and keep it up, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, so the topic is not alien to you. I mean, you were part of the electoral process in 1999, when democracy came back. I mean, even though the military midwifed it, you saw it firsthand, what was done properly, what was not done properly. And, almost 20-something years down the line, we're still going around in circles. It does look like maybe in the past, the elections were free, but not fair. But right now, it's looking like they're not free and they're not fair. So Nigerians are a bit agitated on whatever is being done as per the new electoral law. So my first question to you, because I have people send me questions, so I have to read them. What are your thoughts on the Senate decision to reject mandatory electronic transmission of election results? And how might this impact the credibility of Nigerian electoral process? Over to you, sir.
Okay, in tackling a very important subject of this nature,
yes, sir.
I saw there's a tension always between theory and practice. My background is academics.
Absolutely.
So I've been substantial in the academia, and I consider myself more as an intellectual even than a practitioner.
Absolutely.
So when I get a question like this, I try to find a balance between what is practical, what is before us as a nation, and then what ought to be. What ought to be is the substance of the theory of elections and theory of democracy. So if you go far into that, you may lose not only you and the people around you, you lose the public listening. But if you ground yourself so deeply into the mechanics of electoral reform, into the decision of the Senate, you lose sight of the ontological forces built into a democratic system. What's the identity of this democracy? Why are elections so important? Why are we dealing with form and not content? The Electoral Act, big drive from the Constitution, under which is underpinned the electoral process, is a form of democracy, not a content of democracy. You can have the best electoral act, real-time transmission of results, and then at the end of the 4 years, people are still groaning in poverty, in want, in penury, in discontent. That's the content of democracy. So we're making a fetish of laws that once you get the electoral acts right, We get the translation in real time right. Every other problem is solved. It is not solved. And the mode of engagement is important. End SARS came almost as an event, not a process. End Hunger 2024 almost as an event. But now with electoral reform, it's a process. I wish Nigerians would be engaging about poverty, hunger, discontentment in issues of living standard on a daily basis with the same intensity as I'm dealing with this subject. Having deposited this somewhat theoretical postulation out there, I can go straight into the question.
Right,
indeed, from my investigation, the Senate did not reject electronic, direct, real-time electronic transmission of results. The minority caucus of the Senate actually came out to speak. Like when they met in executive session, almost everybody, almost 85% of the senators present, were all in favor of real-time electronic transmission of results. And they left the executive chambers fully satisfied that the leadership would do the needful when they now convene for the world to know what they've done. Only for the Senate president, so the argument went. And a few others who are highly placed in terms of leadership to simply present the matter. Did we agree on this? We didn't agree on it. What did we agree on? The 2022 model, electoral act model passed. So in that sense, and in practical things, the Senate did not as a body reject it. The leadership seems to have imposed its own decision on the Senate and on Nigerians. So what is required of Nigerians now is agitation, legal, constitutional, non-violent resistance to this decision by a few individuals. Secondly, in conference, when the Senate committee and the House committee will meet to reconcile some differences in terms of the clauses and the provisions, that's when actually the noise level, agitation level should be raised very high. The bar should become increasingly very high for the Senate to sustain it. The voices out there, civic spaces that are empowered now are good. People are really bringing out the torrents of viewpoints they have. Nigerians are outraged in large numbers. This must be sustained, not as a one-off issue, but as an issue that is very, very important and very, very germane to the survival of our democracy, not just the electoral system, but for the system itself as a whole. Now, let's take a step back and examine something technical that people who know the law better than I do will tell you. We are too much in a hurry not to deal with a platform that we have. The 2022 Electoral Act is not ab initio bad. People believe that the electronic transmission, real time, may be the bullet, what they call the silver bullet, to solve all our electoral crises. Elections are managed at two frontiers, the internal environment and external environment. Both are important. The internal environment, of course, is the electoral management body, INEC. INEC processes in terms of organizing election, getting the act ready from the parliament, getting guidelines derived from the act, getting logistical details all prepared in time, both the so-called sensitive materials and non-sensitive materials, getting personnel tuned on election day, coming out in good time, doing the needful, being fair, just, objective, and impartial. That's the electoral internal environment. The external environment is you and I. This kind of public conversation, the voters themselves, the political parties, election observers, and critically important will be the basket of funders, the EU, and the donors, who are very important in marshalling resources for our electoral system to survive. Civic groups like Yaga Africa and other platforms watching what is going on. If you have a law and all these critical stakeholders begin to do the needful, even on the basis of imperfect law we have, we will actually get a better result than we are getting. We seem to be looking for maximalist solution to, in terms of text of a law. Maximalist means every single dot must be there. Every single T must be well crossed. Every single line must be cutting right. It doesn't happen.
Perfect document.
You don't get it. Look at where you are. The contestation between the Democrats who may want a library card as a mode of recognition for you to vote, and Republicans who may want a photo ID. Every state has its own nuance, its own color, its own hue, its own method. So America now has variegated methods of identification of voters. Nigeria has a uniform biometric method which is superior to that of the US. That means if there are 200 million voters or 80 million voters or 100 million voters, everybody is in a uniform state of identification. Biometrics, your picture, your face, your fingerprints. It is not the same where you are. So at that level, we're even more advanced. Remember, we started from the voter's card. We progressed to card reader. We progressed to beavers. We progressed now to IRF. I wonder where else Nigerians will progress to before they can put their feet down and say, we have enough of this platform already out there. Let us begin to find how to plug the loopholes without making an additional law. Somebody even told me that it takes like a 10-year time for one law to succeed another. Which means if an Electoral Act 2022, you should think it takes for an Electoral Act 2032. Now we're going to have one 4 years down the line. You don't keep making laws on every single minute detail, as important as this one is. That is why, for me, it comes back to the issue of content. The content of democracy is, for me, more implicated in our underdevelopment than the form of democracy. We rush into a liberal democratic model. That is why when you started the conversation, you said when democracy was restored, without qualification of that democracy, that is a liberal Western democratic model. We've now taken to be universal model of democracy, a particularistic system from a definite environment has now become globalized in terms of the hegemony of the West. So Chinese democracy is authoritarian. It is not actually a democracy. That's what we say. So hyper partisanship, deep contestations, features in electoral relationship, fraud in managing even the process, corruption in the money spent in elections are all normalized as part of our democracy. Because our democracy is highly competitive, it is not collaborative, it is not cooperative. So these are the philosophical underpinnings of democracy that Nigerians seem not to bother about. And everyone rushes into, what do we do with the IRF? How do we get the Senate to get it done? I agree. And I'm working towards that. And I'm persuaded that all of us must link our hands together in order to get that sorted out. Having sorted it out, we'll begin to understand that elections can only produce legal government. A legality of the government determined by the acuteness of the electoral process in terms of viability, credibility, and impartiality. But legitimacy derives from governance. It may be legal as a government, but illegitimate. Because if the people are hungry, if the people are broken-spirited, if they're discontent in the land, if there's no security, if terrorism haunts them, that you still want election genuinely. Your government is legal, but your government is illegitimate. Let us now make a progression in our analysis from legal foundations of government to legitimate expressions of people's sovereignty.
Wow. Fantastic. Yeah, you mentioned that you're an academic, and that's going to lead me
to my background.
Your background. Now, most of these elections we've always had vice chancellors, professors, as state returning officer, what have you. And everybody has been complaining that most of the alteration has come at that level. What you see, especially like the 2023 election, we saw instances in Port Harcourt, even in Lagos, where there were major alterations. So as an academic yourself, you mentioned clearly now that everybody has a role to play. The citizen has a role to play. And citizenry, of course, divided into all of us, the doctors, the lawyers, the police.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the academic like you. Are you impressed with the role the academic profession has played in our election in recent times?
Now, there are two forces at work.
Please go ahead.
And there's tension between these two forces.
Okay.
Personal integrity.
Okay.
The moral fiber or the ethical imperative around which you build the contours of your being, your personality. You're a professor, distinguished, maybe not just a locally groomed professor, maybe studied abroad in good universities. Maybe you have global understanding and global knowledge and global value system. It's expected of you to manifest that every and at all times, even when you're deployed for duty as a returning officer. That is at the level of personal integrity, bounded around the moral compass of you as an individual, having a very clear moral geography about who you are as a person and what you should do to improve the system and the country you find yourself in. There's another bigger tension, that is systemic forces underwhelming this moral contours or moral imperative. Remember what Karl Marx said in the German ideology. The ideas of the ruling classes are the ruling ideas in every epoch. The classes that control the means of material production control the production and reproduction of values. That means, as we say, a water doesn't get muddied from the middle. A water gets muddied from the top, from the beginning, at the head of the water. If stream doesn't get muddied at the middle. If you find a stream that is very muddy, go at the top. A fish doesn't get rotten from the middle, it starts rotting from the head. Science can tell you that. That makes the professor there broken in spirit. Poverty-stricken university system is reflecting the value formation of the system as controlled by the dominant classes, where the president and his team are seen to be agglutinating or ravaging on national resources, where senators have 10, 15 cars convoy, possibly 50, 70 million every month drawn down, when the mass of the people are so hungry. So expect a professor after 8, 9 years to get a PhD, another 25 years as a professor. He has no house in the village. He has no car that he calls his own. The children are not even well taken care of. He has an opportunity to dip his hand in the tea, and he does. In some instances, as horrifying as it is, it's a reflection of this Marxian thesis of ideas of the ruling class. If the class at the top is disciplined, if the guy with the convoy doesn't bring the traffic light, the poverty-stricken person will not bring the traffic light. If the pump secretary is not corrupt, the messenger will not be corrupt. That's the law of nature. If the mother cow is chewing, the young ones learn how to chew the cord too. So imperatively, why I regret these acts by scholars like me, and why it is important to live above board. I understand extravagant existential challenges that sometimes weigh down heavily on the mindset, on the moral contours, or the ethical imperative that drive individual human behavior. What we can do is, first and foremost, a systemic retool. How universities funded, how our professors been taken care of. I know where you are. You understand the value placed on scholarship, on the academics. If you have that in the like you had in the 70s and the 80s, if you appointed a professor in 1975 or 85 to do this kind of duty, you'd rest assured he or she will do it with diligence, with passion and conviction, without even being morally tested. But now, when you find that the middle class has almost cratered away, you find just a tiny 1% at the top and everybody at the bottom, 99%, surviving on a day-to-day basis becomes incredibly difficult for that moral, being you have as a person to really come to terms and transcend the objective limitations of the system you find yourself.
So now, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate it. That's why I had to ask the question. Because one reason why I asked you that every year or every 2 years, the ASU guys will come, cap in hand, begging the government for increment and all that, and 2 years after, which is maybe an election cycle after that, they're also help perpetuating the same politicians in power. So that's why I asked that. So now,
very correct observation, very good observation.
Okay, so
and very painful too.
So that's why I asked that. A lot of my guests, I know you mentioned Yaga Africa, something he told us been here a couple of times. Yeah, he's been my guest, and we all appreciate what he does. But I've had other guests tell us that, like Professor Tommy, who just turned 70 recently, and we were discussing this issue. And he said it is failure. Nigeria's problem is failure of leadership. And what led to it was, I was asking, do we need a new constitution? Do we have to live together? And he always referenced India, the largest democracy, their Commonwealth like us and all that, So my question in this is that, do you agree that it is failure of leadership vis-a-vis the Nigerian elite, or we still need a constitutional change to agree if we really, really want to still stay together? Because the ship of state sometimes seems rudderless, but like we're not contented staying together. Quick example, I've sat with people that told me that people that live in the coastal areas are naturally more populated than people that live in the hinterland in most countries.
In the savannah,
Nigeria is the reverse, So it does look like we don't have a right census. There's a lot of structural defects. The rank and file, civil service, army are probably more tilted to this group. So that makes it that anybody that comes into power, be it Igbo or Yoruba, is naturally bent towards fulfilling needs or ethnic, curiosities in government, and they're just going to keep going in that circle, and there won't be development. So, like I said, is it failure of leadership, or we need to renegotiate our staying together?
Okay, fine. Instinctually, my mind will go with the rest of most people's mind. Let us implicate leadership. Chinua Achebe, in that forceful document, The Trouble with Nigeria, put it very pungent. The problem of Nigeria, or the trouble with Nigeria, is clearly put the problem of leadership. He didn't even want to look at the issue of leadership in relative terms. That means implicate other variables, societal variables, in the search for our national loss of way, where the rain started to beat us. Like we really cannot remember where the rain started to beat us. He simply says clearly it is that of leadership. Professor Pat Trump, highly regarded and highly celebrated, and good happy birthday to him, 70 now, incredible turn, incredible turn, is equally of that viewpoint, leadership. But in your specific statement, the statement you are making, you implicated the Sahelian, the savannah, the mangrove, or the coastal areas. These are national geographic fault lines. And you mentioned ethnicity. These are equally ontological fault lines in terms of identity. So where implicate leadership, implicate geography, implicate demographics. Nigerian fault lines are very complex. That means you ask yourself, why do we have elections every 4 years? And somehow, we are producing far worse results as we produced in the past. If you have election 1999 and successive election 2003 and 7 and 11 and 15 and 19 and 23 and now going to 27, and incrementally there's a depreciation in terms of the quality of life. There's a lowering of standard. Something must be wrong with the system as constituted beyond leadership. How can 7 elections produce 7 different sets of presidents or leaders, senators, governors, who are lousy in terms of leadership, who do not know what it takes to govern the country properly? So let us search for something beyond leadership, as much as we recognize the centrality of leadership, as a culprit in our national development. I'll look at it from a congenital perspective. How was the democracy bettered in 1999? I was part of that process.
Absolutely.
We were very much in a hurry. That convulsive period when Abuja died and we thought Dorado has arrived. Then Abia died in detention. So there was a pause. And Absalom Abubakar came in with the pyrotechnics of a regular transition. Leave the ban on politics, leave the ban on politicians, register political parties, have an electoral timetable, get people voted in, swear them in, off you go. We did it in 79. It didn't work well. We did it in 99. It's working and wobbling and fumbling for 26 years. But it has not delivered those tools and assets and contents that make democracy enjoyable for the people of the country. We didn't know the Constitution, what it was all about. As a party secretary, we never saw one. We just wanted the military to get out of the way. We thought there's a future date of reckoning when we have to sit down and restructure the country and renegotiate, to use a word, the foundational elements, institutional and structural elements that underpin our idea of a nation and a nationhood. We never got that time because there was closure. The moment you missed the opportunity of 1998, when there was a constitutional vacuum to renegotiate the country, and slam dunk, constitution was bettered in 99, it's incredibly difficult for you to overcome or transcend that constitutional threshold. To change the constitution today in radical parameters may require a Peruvian model, which I will not discuss with you in public. Remember Fujimori? Remember what he said, what he did? He took power in Peru. He didn't like the constitution. He did something. We can say on television because we love democracy. Ultimately, when that thing happened and something happened later, he said, okay, I have a restart for a constitutional conference that will deliver a new brand constitution that I will work with. If you have constitutional amendment processes, you turn it to the president may use his muscle as a chief executive. If the parliament is strong, they can use that constitutional proposal as tissue paper. They will tell the constitution specifically that the constitution can only be amended on the basis of the term set by it. To overwhelm that term, we need to overwhelm the state, overrule the state. That means all this talk about restructuring is academicized in the sense that the why it is important, the what is viable, but the how has not been contemplated by those who carry this kind of propaganda. The how is where the critical mass of the problem lies. How do we toss aside this constitution? How do we survive the vacuum of the person aside? How do we create a transitional model that can now lead to a people's constitution via a referendum that may answer to the kind of yearnings you and I and the majority of millions of Nigerians? That's not a subject we can handle in this kind of conversation, but it's important to point it out here. So as we wait for that Dorado, that future time where the constitutional text may have to be retextualized to give us the bearing, because democracy is on 3 folds: the instrument, the institutions, and the processes. Instrument is faulty. That means the institutions produced from that instrument is 40. And then the processes, the day-to-day life, the electoral processes, the elections and governance are all 40. To get all these things together, we require the thought of the thinking of our intellectuals, the action of our political leaders, and the consensus of different publics.
Wow. So that, I mean, from what you've said, we need to sit down and talk and negotiate our future. Yeah,
it's very important.
It's very important.
It's not a day's job.
I understand.
It requires persistent labor.
Yeah. If not, we just be going out in circle and there'll be nothing left at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Palliatives actually is what you
having said all that, I mean, if you had your way, for example, I mean, I'm hoping that one day that will happen. And if it does, it will be, I mean, it's almost impossible if someone like you is not even part of that process, because you've said so much, you know. But if you had your way, do you think we should continue with the presidential system of government, or we should try the parliamentary system? I'm just asking your personal opinion on that.
Now, I don't even know whether the parliamentary system will be a solution to our crisis of nationhood. We romanticize the parliamentary system because of historical distance. When you look at the periodization in dominance, what happened is the pre-colonial, the colonial, and the immediate post-colonial period. And slam, bam, we had the 63, the parliamentary system, parliamentary republic. Now there's a nostalgic feeling, that sense of historical romance, the good old days. Don't forget that there was incremental decomposition of the institutional and structural levers of that republic, powered by that parliamentary system. Don't forget that from the census of 62 and the negotiation of 63, the action group price of 62, the contested election of 64, the Western regional weight here, political meltdown, and the coup d'etats and counter coups and everything, all are indicative of how lousy that republic was. But when I went back 60, 50, 60 odd years ahead, he said, oh, from this future time, gazing into the past, that was a golden past. It wasn't purely a golden past. It was a fair past. Now, so that means the parliamentary system may not be the entire solution to the problem. The presidential is equally not the same. What do I mean? Democracy has two powerful components. The universal values, which you find in any democratic system. Then the environmental conditioning of democracy. The domestication, the effort to domesticate our democratic system. What we have done is have imported the parliamentary system almost whole scale from the British. We've imported the presidential system almost wholesale from the US. Why don't we try something unique? Why don't we interrogate or rethink liberal democracy in Nigeria, as many are rethinking in Africa? That after 30, 40 years, the end of the big man syndrome, the transition from OAU to AU, with a NEPAD, an African peer review mechanism, coming on board. Let us now find the democracy that suits the tempo of African civilizational evolution, the curve of our historical journey. Why don't you find the democracy that embeds within its core the general principles of liberal democracy, which you have the country where you are, and then elements of indigenous models of democracy. That's where the thinkers should begin to think. Every nation confronted by existential crisis do not summon politicians or traditional rulers. A nation summons its intellect. The Federalist Papers, for example, implicated with a Hamilton, is contestation of ideas by peers who are worrying about the model. Do we retain the monarchy of the British before the kings? Do we have a powerful presidency? Do we have a weak center in the US? These are all the Federalist Papers. They have to rethink democracy to create something that they call in the American dream is formulated in the American Constitution, a slim document that answers to their own, sense of nationhood. Nigerian Constitution should therefore derive from harnessing the multiplicities of the diverse nations of this country and throw in the external, generalized, universal values of democracy to produce a potent Afrocentric democratic model that may answer to the kind of needs and the yearnings of our people. But to blindly capture a homogeneous presidential system that allows a governor 2,008 and a Senate president 550 exotic cars in convoy, all legally purchased. It's a huge drain that cannot be sustained. And let me not try to say go to China. They will think it's authoritarian, illiberal, hybrid regime that doesn't answer to democracy. For them, it's democratic. What happens is that the content of democracy overwhelms the relative weakness of the form of democracy, weak electoral system, no adult suffrage of everybody voting, but somehow or the other, a cooperative, collaborative arrangement between the Communist Party of China and other stakeholding structures, civic groups there, cooperative societies, private bodies, and government and business institutions coming together under the leadership of the Communist Party. Let us have something that is harmonious. Remember that Obasanjo in 1989 published a book called Constitution for National Integration and Development. Very less talked about now. After one war of blessed memory, took him on because he proposed a one-party state. After took him on in a book called Before I Die and challenged him to say, why do you think of a one-party state? But Obasanjo said, if I knew 79 what I knew when I left office, I wouldn't have prescribed a multi-party democracy for Africa. That this hyper-partisan, highly competitive or contested democracy is injurious to African development. You need to build some level of consensus of the youth, of the women groups, of the elite, former leaders, former Supreme Court justices, and so on, council of elders, to yield to an assembly of the people. In terms of aggregate number, a village democracy sort of, as practiced maybe in Igbo land, where that democracy is not by adult suffrage, but through consensus building, through dialogue, contestation of ideas before you reach consensus. So there are many models like that we can tap into. Not this kind of one-party arrangement we are witnessing today, when governors and senators and reps are evacuating, fleeing from their parties and entering the dominant party for the sake of political survival.
Yeah, I have just one question for you, but it's a two-in-one. Now, it's after all said and done, all these things we have been talking about are not going to happen in the immediate. You understand?
Sure.
Yeah, they're not going to. I'm sure we can agree that whether we like it or not as a country, a time will come where we have to sit down and talk. It's an inevitability. But having said that, what the two-in-one question, the first one is this. What advice do you have for the National Assembly right now, in lieu of all that has been happening? Now the House Committee and the Senate Committee are going to come together, harmonize, and there's a lot of tension in the land. The people really want free and fair election. It's like it's a do or die thing right now. So what advice for the National Assembly? My second question is, what advice do you have for President Tinubu? When you were Secretary of AD, I'm sure you work closely with him. He's somebody you know very, very, very well.
I do.
Yeah, and you've interacted with him. I don't know if you're happy or impressed with his presidency, but the second question is, what advice do you have for him in lieu of all that is happening in Nigeria right now? That's for
the National Assembly.
You can give your parting.
For the National Assembly, I read somewhere that the Senate president said, you can't intimidate the Senate. We don't make laws on the basis of sentiment. We make laws on the basis of overarching need of the people, of society across immense historical time. That is false in a way. They've made several laws on the basis of sentiment, laws that are not really positively, attuned to the will of the people. When the collective result of your public hearings, because to make this electoral amendment to the Electoral Act, this amendment to the Electoral Act, they had people submit memoranda. They had public hearings, public engagement, very robust one across the country. And almost to the last man and woman, the emphasis is on IREF, real-time electronic transmission of result.
Yeah.
That is the overall, not sentiment, fact-based ideas that flow from the people on the basis of their lived experiences, especially 2023. And you make a law that does not answer to this public expectation for today and tomorrow. The Senate should be very careful. They are trading on very dangerous ground. But democracy thrives on conversation, on dialogue. When it's shut down conversation and then threw away with impudent, nastiness, the will of the people, the expectation, it's almost like you do not want them to breathe anymore. You're having your leg stamped on their head. When you choke down the terrain or the domain of contestation of ideas, people may seek self-help in various directions. I do not want it to get to that level. So the Senate should climb down from his high horse. The Senate president should listen to the voice of reason and let the conference of the two chambers work diligently to restore this real-time electronic transmission of results That is what the people are telling you. If a child is crying and pointing in direction, either the father is there or the mother is there. Nigerians are pointing in a particular direction in our electoral system. That direction is real-time electronic transmission of results. I caution, must listen to the voice of the people in this regard. For the president, his legacy will not endure because he won a re-election. We don't know what will happen. The legacy will endure. How did you strengthen institutions of democracy as you met them? How did you strengthen human relationship between groups of people? Nigeria is a complex, heterogeneous, multifarious country of diverse nationalities and incredibly deep fault lines. Do you manage these diversities? How do you leave a stronger economy? How do you leave a system that people will say, oh my God, it's more egalitarian than he met it? How do you look at the guardrails of democratic governance and ask yourself as a president, am I strengthening them or weakening them? How do democracy actually die? Don't look at with a gunshot. It dies with a whimper. When civic spaces shrink, when the media is harassed by cyber laws that are simply made to harass them and impede on independence, when political parties are disappearing before our very eyes because of the pressure from outside is too much, when local leaders are accused of terrorist financing, and when state institutions appear to have been captured. These are all challenges people are seeing here and then said, as a president, this should not be a legacy. A legacy should be to build a more inclusive, more equitable, more egalitarian society. And I do hope that in the remaining 1 year plus of the first tenure, the groundwork for this will be laid. And whatever happens for the second time after the election, I do hope that it will strengthen and consolidate democracy better than we have today.
Thank you, sir. Udenta O, Udenta. You have spoken very well. You are highly revered. You're a patriot. Thank you for your time. And I will not hesitate to knock on your door again if you think.
No problem. It's a pleasure speaking with you and everybody else.
Yeah, thank you. To all our viewers in the 7th continent, you heard it there. Everybody has a role to play. The elite have a strong role to play. The office of the citizen, too, has a role to play.
Very important.
To our Senate, you are elected by the people, at least, So get down your high horse and listen. Vox populi, vox Dei, they say. Thank you, everybody. It's a wrap. Bye.